My name is Stacy. Before I was a Boyd, I was a Branch, and I'm 36 years old. We have 5.5 kids. Yeah, we have 4 at home. We have an 11-year-old. We have 7-year-old twins, a 4-year-old Major, who is everything his name says that he is. We have a bonus baby, Umari, who we are doing a kinship with CSB for. He is 5 months. We got him when he was 3 weeks old. And a month after Umari came with us and we were settling in with that, my husband was like, "Hey, have you came on your monthly?" And I'm like, I can't remember. And he was, being the great husband that he is, he was like, "Well, you need to go get a test, call a doctor, draw some blood. You need to do something." And I did. I went and got a test, and I took it, and it came out positive. And I said, "Jesus of Nazareth, you're going to have to help me with this." And I went to Geneva's house. Where's Geneva? I don't see the puff. There's Geneva. I went to her house with a pregnancy test in my pocket, and I laid on her couch, and we both called out to Jesus of Nazareth together. And I came home, and I told my husband, like, "Surprise!" And he was like, "I think you need to take another one." And so we took another test, and that one came out positive. And so, I mean, it all worked out. We got the minivan beforehand. We're good. But have you ever thought, when I was thinking about this talk, what the Holy Spirit was bringing to me was, at first, who am I to you? And I started thinking about it, like, who is God to me, and who has he been to me, and all that great stuff. And then last night I was sitting and I was reading over some stuff, and the Holy Spirit said, "Man, you're doing the highlight reel, the husband, the kids, that type of thing." And then one of our players came over. They came over to eat at 10 o'clock. And I'm up cooking breakfast, and he's like, "Man, Mom, what you doing?" And I was telling him about this going on today, and he sits down, and he's like, "You can tell me about it. Practice on me." I'm like, "No, sir. Just go eat your pancakes. You'll be all right." However, God has been so many things to me. From the beginning, he's been a healer. He's been a redeemer. He's been a restorer, a purifier. He's been the perfect author. I grew up here in Akron. I was born here. I'm the youngest of 4 children. When my mom had me, my brother was 10. My older sister was 8. My other older sister was 6. And then here I came. I was the little one who, for a while, I didn't talk. I didn't want to talk to anybody. It's not because it was something wrong, but I felt I was an introvert from a young age, and there was so much going on around me that I didn't talk. We lived in a little house on Valdez on the west side by Erie Island, and I can remember being probably about 5 or 6 years old. And by that time, my mom had started drinking really heavy. And my dad was not only a drinker, but he had started dabbling in drugs. He was snorting coke and weed and whatever else he could probably get his hands on. And so there was always fights going on in the house. And one of the last fights that my parents had, my dad had, I don't know what happened. They had a party or something, and my mom was a little lady. She was probably about 5 foot, 100 pounds, and my dad was a big dude. He was probably about 6 foot, 6'1", probably about a good 260. And he used to wear this was back in the 80s, so y'all got to bear with me. But he wore like the Bill Cosby sweaters and the leather pants. Yeah. And so they were kind of like the odd couple. And I can remember it was a house party one night, and something had happened, and he got mad, and he ended up hitting my mom. And when he hit her, he knocked her out because, like I said, she was little, and she was lit already, so, you know. And he knocked her out, and we thought she was dead. And my brother was 16 at the time, and he was kind of running the streets doing this thing. And my two older sisters left me there with my mom, told me to stay there with her, and they ran to go get my brother. And so when my brother came back, he ended up putting alcohol up under her nose to see if she was still alive. And she was alive. And so my brother, being the gangster that he is, he ended up going to get his boys, and they went looking for my mom. And he told me to stay there. And so I stayed there, and I'm sitting there with my mom. And somehow or another, my dad came back to the house, and he came back, and he looked at my mom, and I'm sitting on the side of her, and he urinated on her. And he walked out. And I was only like 5 or 6, and I remember thinking, like, man, somebody would catch hell if they ever tried that with me. So after that, my mom we ended up leaving. It was kind of a rush thing. I don't know exactly how long it was, but I remember my mom walking me to school. I went to Erie Island, and it was right up the street. So she walked me to school that day, and we went to the office, and I guess she got my records, and we turned back around, and when we got home, it was a moving truck there. And so my mom packed up everything in the house, and she only left my dad his clothes, and she left his stereo because he was really into music, and all of his records. And so we left, and we went down south to Rome, Georgia, where her family was from. And by the time we got down there, I absolutely hated it. My mom had a younger sister there, and she had a brother there, and all the rest of her family was there. And the main reason I hated it so much was because my mom was comfortable there, so that meant that she drank more and things went on and that type of thing. And by that time, my brother was dealing drugs. He had moved out. I mean, he was probably 18, living with a 30-year-old woman, doing this thing. And so down there, it got really, really bad. And my mom drank a lot, and things went on. And my two older sisters, they kind of did their thing. The oldest ended up getting pregnant. I think she was 18. She ended up 17. She ended up getting pregnant. And it got to the point where my mother was like, well, I just can't do this anymore. And we packed up, and she said, we're going back to Ohio. And since my two older sisters was old enough, she said, you guys can make a decision. You can stay or you can go. And they decided to stay. And so me and my mom came back, and we lived with her older sister for a couple of months because she came and she got a job, and we got a place, and things were going okay. By that time, she had stopped drinking as much. So I thought things were going better. But, she started drinking again. And by this time, I had got to high school, and I was feeling myself. And, yeah, when you're 14 and your little figures start coming. Yeah. I was feeling myself, and I was a freshman at Firestone. And we never had the sex talk. The extent of our sex talk was keep your dress down and your panties up. Didn't do a lot for me, obviously, but I ran with it, and I found my first boyfriend, and I was 14 years old, and the dress went up and the panties went down. And just a side note, just thinking about that, I lost my virginity, and it was horrible. And if I hear Reasons by Earth, Wind, and Fire to this day, I will literally be ready to puke. So, long story short, I ended up getting pregnant at 14. And by this time, my two sisters had moved back up to Ohio with my mom. And one of them was really, really in the church. I don't know if she was saved or if she just liked going to church every week, or if it was the long dresses. Like, she was that kind, like wear the long dresses and no makeup and, will hit you over the head with the Bible. And so I ended up getting pregnant. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my mom. My game plan was, hey, I'll just be pregnant, and when she find out, it'll be too late for her to do anything. That was my plan. Didn't work out. I came home one day, and my mom was there, and my aunt, Virginia, which was the sweetest lady. Excuse me, my oldest daughter is named after her. But she was the sweetest lady. And she's like, Stacy, she tried to catch me outside, like, whatever's going on, you need to tell your mom now, because she called me from work, and I had pregnancy tests. And I'm like, Jesus of Nazareth, what am I going to do? So I thought I outsmarted her. My mom ended up telling me to take the test. And I dunked the pregnancy test in the toilet water. And then I, urinated and gave it back like, see, I'm not pregnant. That didn't work because the next day I came home from school and she was there again. And this time she was real gangster with it. She had on her gloves. And she was like, sit on the toilet. I'm like, this is really an invasion of my privacy. And my aunt was like, just do whatever she tells you to do, Stay, just do it. And so I sit down, and my mom is in there squatting, and she got the test. And I'm just sitting there, and she's like, piss. And I'm like, and we sat there for a while, because I'm like, I do not have to pee. I don't. And so she was like, well, we're just going to be in here all day. And so finally, I peed on the stick, and she found out I was pregnant. And my aunt was kind of just like, okay, I'm just going to leave, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to pray. And she was like, Stay, just give me a call tomorrow. And so, of course, after my aunt left, my mom was hot. Like I told you, she was 5 foot, 100 pounds, and was like thug, straight thug. And so, man, it was no, like, you know how you see the Lifetime movies and you see people yelling about the pregnancy and it's like, oh, you're pregnant. It was none of that. My mom was just like, yeah, we about to get this work in. So she ended up going to the closet. She got a broom. And I mean, she beat me till the broom broke. And so the next day, she was like, give me his number, the guy's number. So I had to give the number, and she called his mom, and she told her, and the mom was kind of like, because he was from the burbs. So his mom was kind of like, well, let's sit down. I can call my husband. We can sit down, and we can talk about this and see what we're going to do. And my mom was like, no, just give me half the money. She's getting an abortion. So we ended up going, and we got an abortion, and it was the horriblest thing ever. I remember going in, and my mom was filling out the paperwork, and I think I was about 5 months. I was far along. And so by that time, they did the ultrasound, and, the nurse was like, hey, do you want me to tell her what it is? And my mom was like, no, she doesn't need to know. And so I was crying, and I was upset, and the nurse came back in. My mom had walked out to give the paperwork, and she was like, it's a boy. And so I had the abortion, and I went home, and of course I was upset. I was in pain. I didn't know what to do, and I laid down. And I don't know how long it was. It seemed like it was 5 minutes, but I remember my mom waking me up, telling me, go clean the kitchen. And I get up, and I'm trying to clean the kitchen, but I'm bent over because I'm in so much pain. And, she came in, and she just looked at me. She was like, clean it. And I'm like, I can't. And I remember us just getting into this scuffle about it. And so finally I got the kitchen together, and I ended up going back and lay down. And I remember she woke me up again, and she said, get in my room. And she made me sleep at the foot of her bed because she said that she couldn't trust me. So after this abortion, my mom never said anything else about it. But my sister, the one that I told you wore the long skirts, she came home, and my mom had said something to her about what had happened. And, you would think the thing that somebody would say is like, man, let me pray with you, or let me pray for you. It was none of that. She just told me I was going to hell. And so, thank you, Tina. I forgot to bring those up. I knew I was going to need them. So we were going through this big thing about that. And this Aunt Virginia, she had ended up coming to get me that weekend. And I was sitting in her car, and I was ashamed, and I was looking out the window, and she said, you could talk to me about it, right? And I told her I didn't want to talk about it. And she told me, she said, sometimes we do the worst stuff, but God always forgives us. And all you have to do is to ask him. And so I sat in the car, and I looked out the window, and I cried. And I told you she was like the sweet, sweet aunt. And we pull up to her house, and she looked at me, and she said, I just heard the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And he's anointed you to be a mother. And I kind of held that in and never talked about it again. And you would think that I kind of learned my lesson, but I think I was 20 years old. I got pregnant again. And this time, I just knew from the guy I was with. And you know how you with somebody, you're not supposed to be with them. And then something happened, and you're like, why am I even dealing with you? It was that kind of situation. And so I ended up getting an abortion. I didn't tell him, I didn't tell anybody. I just had the abortion, and I kind of kept it moving. And so when I was 23, my Aunt Virginia, she went to the hospital. And this was just out of nowhere. She had said she wasn't feeling really good, and she had an appointment, so she went to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And so at this time, it wasn't like you could talk to her or anything because she had fell into a coma. And so it was me, my mom, her husband, and her only daughter. We were all at the hospital together, and her husband wanted to put her in hospice. And so my mom, and I had never seen my mom really show emotion, and my mother cried and begged him, like, let me take care of my sister. Don't put her in there, I'll take care of her. And so he finally agreed, and I had to take my mom to her job, and she had to tell him she didn't know when she was coming back, if she was coming back. All she knew that her sister was sick and she needed her. So for the next couple of months, that's what we did. We kind of just took care of my aunt. She was still in a coma when she was home. And then one day she just woke up. And it was funny because she was this reserved lady. I mean, she was one that she didn't cuss, she didn't drink, she didn't do anything. When she got mad, she'd be like, come on, tell me the cotton picking truth. Like, she was that kind of person. And so she finally woke up from this coma, and my mother was taking care of her, and we were all there. And it was kind of like she would have these random talks with me. And the one day, I was ticked off because my mom had went outside and she was drinking, and, I could smell it on her. And then I'm just like, just go lay down somewhere. I'll stay in here with my aunt. And so my aunt told me, she was like, you need to have some grace when it comes to your mom. And I'm just like, I don't really want to hear all of that. I've been dealing with this, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, have you ever asked her what she's been through? And I said, no, I know about my dad, whatever. And she said, our mom died when she was 12 years old. She died of cancer and she died a couple of months after she had her 5th child. And she said, she had to raise us. And she said she was 12 years old. Her mother was dead. Our dad had went to jail, and she was getting up every day like she was a grown woman, and she did it for years. And she said, that's why I love her so much. And she said, that's why you never heard me talk bad about her. I don't care how drunk she got, what she did. She said, I'll always love her, and you need to love her and respect her too. And so I kind of started looking at my mom a little bit differently. And at around that same time, I ended up giving my life to Christ, but I still had one foot in the world, and I was still doing my thing on the side. So, did I tell y'all I used to date thugs? Okay, well, that's a side note. so I was dating this guy, and he was a thug, and I ended up getting pregnant again for the third time. And so this time I was just like, listen, I'm going to have this baby. I know your track record, do what you got to do. I'll be fine. And all of this is going on at the same time. My aunt is sick. And so I'm pregnant. My aunt is dying of cancer. I really don't know what to do. I'm going to church. I met the church I was going to, I had a pastor, my very first pastor, my very first church. Her name was Pastor Greer. And she was the prayingest woman I have ever met in all my days. She would pray at the drop of a hat. She had me at the church at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I used to work midnights at the Oriental House. And she would have me, as soon as I got off, she'd be like, well, meet me at the church, Sister Stacy. We gonna pray today. And so we would go and we would pray and we would pray and we would pray. And then she started doing this thing where she would come to my house. And she'd be like, well, Sister Stacy, we've been praying, so now it's time for you to get in this word. So she would open up the word of God to me, and she would read the word, and she would explain it to me. And she took this time with me. And so, like I said, my aunt is not doing the best. And finally, the hospice workers came, and they were like, hey, it's not going to be long. So she ended up dying. And as she died, we're all in the room. And I remember when she died, how they say that, how you see on movies, you see people die and their body releases. That's what happened. And so the funeral people came to pick her up. And I remember my mom was in tears, and she's like, no, I can't let her leave like this. I got to get her cleaned up. And my mom made me come in a room with her. She was like, we're going to get her together. She can't leave out of here like this. So me and my mom were in this room. We're cleaning my aunt up. We're getting her dressed. And my mom's like, I got to comb her hair. I got to do all of this. We got to get her together. So we did. We have this funeral. Great. That next week, I ended up miscarrying. And so I went to the doctor to have the DNC, and he told me that I had no problem getting pregnant, but he said the 2 previous abortions I had, they had messed up my cervix. And he said, instead of your body protecting the child, it does the exact opposite. And he said, I don't want to be, negative, but just don't plan on having any kids. You can get pregnant, you can conceive, but you won't be able to carry full term. So after all of this, I meet this guy at church. He got on my nerves really, really bad. And he was the usher. And I would walk in, and he would be like, hey, how you doing? And I'd be like, what's up? How you doing? And he'd be like, I need you to smile for me today. And I'd be like, this dude is crazy. And so this went on for a while, and then he asked me, he started walking me to my car. And this is all different from me because I told you I dated thugs. So then he'd be like, hey, can I walk you to your car? And I'm like, okay, sure. And so he would walk me to my car, and then I had started working in children's ministry. So he would come downstairs and eat all of our snacks. And then he would just, and I told you I worked midnight. So then he was like, can I have your number? And he would call me every night to make sure I got home from work. I got to work, and then he would call me every morning to make sure that I got home. And so this went on, and finally, Kemp asked me out on a date. And so we went out and we were talking, and we just kind of knew. He said he proposed, but I don't remember. I think it was kind of just like, so when we gonna get married? And we met in November of 2004, and we ended up getting married that next April. So it was really quick. My family was very upset. They said that I was in a cult. They didn't know what was going on. So me and Kemp Well, before we got married, we had to have the talk about everything. And I had to tell him everything that was going on because he was like, hey, I want 4 kids, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if that can happen because this is why. And he was like, you know what? I know you my wife, and God said I was going to be fruitful and multiply, so we good. And I'm just like, all right, whatever. So we ended up, before we got married, I got the depot shot because I'm like, hey, let's, trying to, I was thinking it over. I'm an introvert. I told you I think about everything. So I got this depot shot, and I thought I was good. Next month, I ended up pregnant. What? How is this going to happen? So we have this kid. Her name is Virginia. Carried her exactly 40 weeks, had her on a due date, which was awesome. I was a little upset at the hospital because my mom had called me, and I told you that she was a drinker, and she called me, and I could tell she was tipsy, and I was mad at her throughout my pregnancy because, she didn't want me to get married, and who is this dude, and blah, 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 and it was a Lifetime movie, and you're going to go missing, and whatever. So when Virginia came out, she was this little light-skinned baby with jet black hair. And that's exactly what my mom is. She was a little light-skinned lady with jet black hair. And she was like, yeah, that's what a baby looked like to me. And so we had this baby. Everything's going good. Virginia is 1.5. I get a call from my sister that said that she's on her way to our house, that my mom needed me to pray. And I'm like, what? What's going on? So my mom gets there, and she's crying. She's like, I'm in a lot of pain. I don't know what's going on. I had to call off work today. And I'm like, this is serious because this lady has never called off before. So she calls off work, and I had a retreat to go to that night. And I'm like, okay, well, call me and tell me what's going on. And my sister called me, and she said it's stage 4 lung cancer. So I went to the hospital when I got back in Akron, and my mom was sitting in this hospital chair, and she just looked like this little frail lady. And I remember walking in, and I teared up, and I started crying, and she was like, get out of here with all that. Don't come in here crying. I'm good. And I'm like, okay. So we come in, they talk about what they're going to do, and the cancer had eaten through 4 of her ribs. And so she did chemotherapy. She did radiation. Everything seemed to be going okay. If you'd have asked me then, I was believing God is a healer. She'll be okay. She's not going to die. And she liked Kemp now, so everything was good. She cooked them pots of greens. Like, we were on it. We were on a good track. And so one day Kemp came home, and he's like, hey, I've been praying. And I'm like, Lord, what is this about? And he's like, I've been praying, and I really feel like the Holy Spirit is telling me to, that your mom needs to move in with us. And I'm like, what? And so he's like, yeah, I just want her close. And I'm like, well, you're going to have that conversation with her. So he's like, all right, if you ever met my husband, he talks to anybody about anything, any place. And so we go over to my mom's house, and he gave her what she liked, which is banana popsicles. We took banana popsicles over, and he talked to her, and he was like, hey, we love you, and we want you to be with Virginia, so will you move in with us? And so at first, I thought she was going to cuss him out, but she didn't. She ended up saying yes. And so we were making these plans for her to move in, and everything was going good. I get a call from my niece on her birthday at like 6 a.m, and I'm thinking, what is it? It's her 18th birthday. So I'm like, I told you I was going to bring you balloons to school. We'll be fine. And she's like, no, Grandma can't breathe. And I asked her where my sister was because she was in nursing school, and she was like, she's doing CPR on her. And so I said, okay, give me a second. Let me call Kemp. I'll call you back. And so I called Kemp. I went to the gym, so he wasn't answering the phone. And my niece called back, and she's frantic. She's screaming. She's like, Stacy, she's dead. And so at this time, I completely forgot Virginia was in the house. So I go outside, and Kemp had the good car, and he left the little Honda. It was a turquoise Honda Civic that you had to put in like 4 different gears. And it was a regular shift. You weren't supposed to do that, but if you went too fast, you would have to change the gear. And so I'm trying to start the car up. I can't start the car up. And so I ended up having to go to our neighbor's house. the nicest people you'll ever meet, because I'm banging on their door at 6 a.m. I'm like, hey, I need to get to my mom's. And he's like, okay, I'll take you. And so then at this time, Kemp pulls up. And when I get to my mom's house, she's on the bed, and sure enough, she's dead. And I remember just praying, and there was nothing else I can do. And Kemp came in, and he was like, we got to worship God in the good and in the bad. And so we sat down and we prayed, and they ended up, the ambulance came and the police were there, and they ended up having to take my mom out, and they couldn't get the gurney down her hallway, so they had to carry her out the house in the body bag. And I just remember how hard that was. And after that, I had to do her funeral. Then we had to go down south for a separate funeral. And everything was a whirlwind. Fast forward to now, Kemp was in graduate school. He had to write a paper. He wrote this paper about his life in 5 years, and he said that he had 4 kids with a set of twins. And he told me, and I'm reading this paper, I'm proofreading it, and I'm like, I don't add my agreement to this. This is a lot of kids. And a couple of months later, I found out that I was pregnant again. And they told me I had a really big uterus. So I had to I had to get an ultrasound right away. And it ended up being our twins. So then we got pregnant with Major. We had Mage, and through this whole time, Kemp was coaching. And he ended up getting a job at Kenmore. And so, yeah, Kenmore. All right. So he got this job at Kenmore, and we said that we were going to be all in. So we moved to Kenmore. And God has been a restorer, because not only did he give me kids of my own and little Umari, but he's blessed us to be able to have these boys come into our house. It's not a little thing. I know it seems like a little thing. You're just feeding them. But for them to come over and they'll ask, can they spend the night? They'll ask, can they just stay? They'll ask if I can give them a hug. And I've become like an assistant coach, Noel. Like, I open up the field house. I wash the dirty uniforms. I know how to do the little playboard thing. And so I feel like I'm a coach. But in all that to say, God is a restorer. He uses everything for his good. He's a giver of second chances. He's my savior. He's my restorer. He's the one who has redeemed me and restored my womb. And I think I'm done, so I can finish crying.